So we're going to finish up, and again, this is all online. Some of you mentioned that you can't find it. It's under content. Okay? You'll see it on the left side. If anybody wants me to show you after class, I'm more than happy to do that. It's not that hard to find. If you do have an issue with it, though, again, it should be a problem because we're now moving on to the Hitler book. But if you haven't read the American Murder and Exceptionalism and the Mass Murderer article, we're going to go over that today, but I want you to read it. It's important when we get to Hitler. And you'll see some of the some of the congruencies and similarities between general characteristics that describe mass murderers and serial killers and this guy. The difference between him and someone like Son of Sam did not have an army. I would also say anybody who thinks that this person was psychotic ought to look up the definition of psychotic. Most psychotics can't run for national office. Most psychotics, it's very difficult for them to convince people to do things that they want them to do. Okay? Now, I'm not saying he wasn't sociopathic. I mean, we'll talk about the differences between those two things. The main difference, psychopaths are usually disconnected from reality to the point where they're unaware of the morality or immorality of the action they're doing. There was a woman who failed to get tenure, and supposedly she had some kind of psychotic episode. She went in and shot some of her colleagues at work, and claimed later, that she didn't remember doing the shooting and all this other stuff. Some people would just say, like I would say to people who accuse him of Hitler being crazy, that's just an excuse. Don't let this guy off the hook. He knew what he was doing. This is a sociopath. He knew it was wrong. He didn't care. That's the main difference. Sociopaths have no conscience. They are very much mimic the behavior of narcissists who think that they have the ultimate right and everybody else is stupid or worthless and that they're superior and that whatever I want to do is right. And if I control the government and I make it so, like here's how you get away with committing crimes when you take over a government. You just change the law. Hitler actually made a law that said if you're Jewish, this is what we're going to do to you. It was embedded in the law. You know, seriously, it was horrendous. And that's why many Germans felt it difficult to stand up to the regime. You know, it's like a snake. You step on its head, not its tail. If you step on its tail, it's going to turn around and bite you. And with the Nazi regime, fine, you can go after the guy who's standing in front of the Jewish shop, but he's going to tell on you and bring 5 of his friends, and they're going to come with guns, and they're going to take you away too. And you can criticize the German people for being cowards if you want. Put yourself in that situation. Right? There were actually some Jewish people who collaborated with Hitler because they felt they had to, particularly in the ghettos once they were created. But there were actually Jewish people that helped him on his rise up. It's bizarre, but it's true. They tended to ignore what he wrote in Mein Kampf. You can accuse Hitler of a lot of things, but you can't accuse him of not being honest about what he was going to do. I mean, this would be like OJ going, yeah, I'm going to kill my wife and her friend. When I get the chance. You can't actually... Did you ever hear the... I know this is a tangent, I probably shouldn't say it. Did you guys realize what explanation they gave for Ron Goldman being at the house? He was returning her sunglasses while he was at work. Yeah! My work always lets me just leave and go to Beverly Hills and drop sunglasses off to a very attractive single woman. That happens all the time. They were dating, and that's what OJ thought. Anyway, supposedly OJ told a friend later that Nicole came to the door with a knife in her hand and he lost it. We'll see. Anyway, but again, the point is, he's in jail now, so we're all safe. I don't know, maybe he's in it. The one thing I would tell you, have people been wrongly convicted in the past? Yeah. And just as many probably have been wrongly acquitted. Yeah. So, and a lot of people on the jury said, hey, this was about getting back at the LAPD as much as it was the lack of evidence in the case. But again, remember Johnny Cochran, if it does not fit, you must acquit. You know? How can you argue against such dazzling rhymes? And Johnny Cochran was charismatic. There's no doubt about it. Too bad he's dead. Anyway, so let's move on here. Again, we'll get to Hitler. We'll talk about the mass murder thing. characteristics of these people. And I'll tell you right now, before people like Hitler were murderers and stuff, they were just a kook down the street. And now I'm probably going to make everybody think, man, there's a kook on my street.
Probably is.
There is, I can guarantee you. Here's the problem. There are a lot of sociopaths out there that are sort of like bubbling underneath the surface. And many of them are real quiet people, and they keep to themselves, and they seem normal. Like, Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbors, who's a mass murderer, said, oh, he was normal, just kept to himself. He'd come out, sweep his porch every once in a while for 9 hours. And, you know, I mean, I'm being facetious. I added that last part. Obviously, it didn't work as a joke. But anyway, the fact is that it's not always apparent who these people are, and particularly introverted narcissistic people who hold their thoughts, and Hitler was very extroverted. But there are a lot of them like the BTK killer. That guy killed somebody on his lunch hour and went back to work like nothing happened.
That's hot.
Your friend is trying to say that you are a potential mass murderer? What would make you say that about her?
You had her 3 semesters, you know.
But she never did. I wouldn't say I picked up on something like that. Well, you haven't directed your murderous rage at me or anything like that, so I guess it's okay for now. Anyway. But again, I think what's interesting is that we have to look back at these people's biography. We have to look at how they were raised. One of the interesting things, I'm going to show you a documentary on Monday. It compares Hitler's early childhood with Stalin's. And it is bizarre how they mirror each other. It's great. It's a great documentary. I love the guy who does the commentary. He sounds like a German. And he sounds like somebody who was in World War II. And he's just got this great accent. And his voice sounds real steely. Like it sounds like it's a steel guitar. Like steel strings. Like it's just... And it gives it this air of like foreboding and stuff. It's a great documentary. Right, and I've got a lot of because Hitler is who he is. In Hitler, your computer might crash. How much stuff come up? I'm telling you right now. I remember when I was looking for that documentary, I was like, oh, maybe that one's it. Maybe that one's it. Maybe that was like, damn. And then I start watching another one, and go, man, this one's good.
I found it on Netflix.
I mean, the History Channel loves Hitler. He's like their whipping boy. It's like their thing. You know, like show. They don't do as much as they used to. But for the longest time, before they started doing their own programs, the History Channel was like the World War, World War II, HD, all those. No, they do. National Geographic does a lot, and there's also a channel called the Military Channel. And they actually show a documentary on World War I. Most people don't know anything about, which Hitler fought. Okay. And believe it or not, he was in 50 battles, and if you know anything about World War I, he survived every single battle. And that is so... I think the average lifespan of a soldier at one point during the later stages of World War I was 5 days. I know, that's what I'm saying. Well, at the end of the war, people were like, I'm not running into a machine gun. There was a lot of stuff the sergeant goes, do this, and like, I don't think so. There was a lot of, especially at the end of the war, where it seemed like nobody was going to win. And the French soldiers and the German soldiers and everybody else was like, what the hell are we doing this for? I don't even remember what we're fighting about.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sounds like Vietnam or something. Man, who knows? Maybe in 100 years, if we're still fighting the war on terror, people are like, what was this about? Like, you remember 100 years ago? It's like,
Already have people saying that.
Well, I think what's interesting, you see how quickly people's minds move. I'll tell you right now, and Jeff, maybe you can mention this or talk about this. Soldiers are now coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, mostly Afghanistan now. Most of the troops are out of Iraq, and they come back and they look at the newspapers and talk to people, and they go, "You people act like there ain't even a war going on. Like you're just completely." And can you blame the public for not wanting to see this stuff day after day after day? It reminds them too much of Vietnam. Even though there's not as many people being dying, and we actually are succeeding to some extent, but it just, for most, and plus the economic recession, it's like, I mean, the news is a horror show, man. It's like a minefield. You talk about the economy and how crappy it is, and you talk about, all these scandals or kids being molested and stuff like that, and then now you're going to talk about, Iraq and Afghanistan. Can't you put, a firefighter saving a cat in a tree, and there's someone? Huh?
There's no awareness for it at all.
Well, there's also bad reporting going on because reporters go over there and they look for stories with bodies and blood instead of looking for, is Afghanistan improving? Are they building schools? Is the government stable? Is it corrupt? how many, is the Taliban, where are they at? Are they in the south? There's no strategic reporting going on. It's all tactical. Oh, I followed the 1st Marines into a battle, and it's like, but you're not giving me the overview. I don't mind you going there, but get up on top of the situation and tell me what the hell's going on. Because I'm telling you right now, there ain't a single American who can tell you what's going on in Iraq right now. Unless they just got back. Even people who are in Iraq can't tell you what's going on. You're in Baghdad, you don't know what's going on in Fallujah. Jeff?
I mean, it's also the other way around too.
That they don't realize the recession.
It's not. Yeah, it's like we were in like this huge bubble, and
where everything's filtered.
Where everything's filtered, and you only can read like certain papers, and
military radio.
Yep, watch certain channels of television. You only watch like an hour of
Did
television.
they let you see Al Jazeera in English?
Yeah, they did.
Did they?
It was that. You know what? Al Jazeera. People.
No, they're good reporters. Ain't no doubt about that.
People give a lot of guff to Al Jazeera, but if you actually watch it,
it's actually not. It's not.
It's
yeah, they try to make it out like they support terrorists.
It's actually closer to BBC than anything.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty
really
close.
like
Huh? It might be now.
Yeah, I mean it's like very straight arrow. I mean, granted, like.
Well, they don't like the issue is that Al Jazeera, because it's focused on a Middle Eastern audience or even a European audience. When Americans kill civilians accidentally, that stuff makes the front news. That's the first story they talk about. And the U.S. military doesn't like their mistakes being broadcast everywhere. And I would say to the military, then stop bombing the Chinese embassy when you're bombing Belgrade.
Well, that's what it is. It's very, and it all came down to one report.
And Abu Ghraib was horrendous.
Yeah, it all came down to one report that I think it was CNN that saw it and basically showed the United States that this is what they're pumping into
like, remember the Pakistani soldiers got killed? That was a big story.
The unit of Marines.
Or the urinating on the on the corpse.
That was a huge hit to the military.
Which should tell you, back to those of you who remember from Social 1 and 2, conflict theory, that the media is not interested in the truth. It's interested in spinning the truth or ignoring information, or at least a military-controlled element of the media, to make the military look good. And it's more about making the United States look like a good country and that we're not doing anything wrong, than actually telling the more complete story of, yes, America does this right, but it's doing this wrong. And if you have a government that's cheerleading for, if you have a media that's cheerleading for corporations and governments, you get the economic crisis like we get now, when they're not being honest and say, hey, AIG, and people saw this. Like David Faber, AIG is doing funny stuff, investigating. They didn't want to because you sound like you're throwing water on the bonfire when I'm just trying to roast my marshmallows, and now you're going to put it out, right? You're taking the whiskey away when we're just getting started. So thanks a lot. And you look unpatriotic. How dare you tear this country down? And it goes back to Vietnam, partly because the reporters were allowed to go anywhere, and they filmed soldiers burning down villages, without giving any context of why that was being done, that was a VC-infected village, and that those people were killing American soldiers. But instead they see somebody blowing someone's brains out on the street, not knowing that that guy was a terrorist and he had killed 20 people, right? If you've ever seen the pictures of Vietnam, one of the iconic images is a South Vietnamese army commander walking up to a Viet Cong terrorist, or operative who had just invaded the embassy or the police station, I think, in Saigon, and shot a bunch of people in cold blood. And he walks right up to him. He's got a handgun in his hand. He goes like that, boom, and the blood comes out the side of his nose, and he slumps down. And people look at that and say, "See, isn't that terrible?" It's like, look, that's what war is. It's not tickle fighting, and it's not Nerf ball, and it's not even football or hockey. It is killing people. Huh? A little, yeah, the strategy, to some extent, yeah. All right. All right, so let's finish this up, and then we'll move on to talk about the articles. We'll talk about some of these elements of serial killers and why they do some of the things they do. And again, we'll talk about these elements of deviance and theories that we're going to use to discuss why people do these things. But I think that the article does a very good job, I think, of spelling out some of these aspects. And there's a chart, I think it's called Table 6. It's in the back of the document. You want to make sure to read that over. But again, remember we talked about this element of the postmodern perspective on deviance. The deviance is whatever you think it is, or whatever, or what you feel it is. So one person's idea, or one community's, or particularly one nation's idea of what's wrong is different than what other people think is wrong, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That if Saudi Arabia wants to outlaw alcohol, that's their issue. If they want to treat women like dirt, that's just who they are. Other people look at that and go, no. There are universal standards of deviance, and they need to be applied. And if you don't allow women to vote, and you don't allow women to go outside without full coverings on, women in some Muslim countries that are severe Sharia-based countries, like it used to be in Afghanistan, if you're a grown woman, you cannot walk to the market without your 3-year-old child, male child, walking in front of you.
You have to go with your husband.
Yeah, or a male child.
Yeah.
And I don't know, are the women allowed in the stores at all even, or they have to send the kids in? You see and Westerners look at that and go, man, that's wrong, right? And Westerners have a reason to say that was that the way it was in the West for a while? Not maybe that bad, but were women treated like dirt to some extent? Even in this country, women didn't get to vote till 1920. And I'll tell you right now, in the 1950s, if a man hit his wife, he didn't go to jail. And or most of the time didn't go to jail, and the cop would sometimes say stuff like this. Well, what'd she do to deserve it? The idea of date rape didn't exist. Child molestation was sort of up in the air. Child abuse was up in the air. Hey, I'm just spanking my child. Not if blood is coming out. Huh?
Should have been watching The Godfather.
Yeah. And then when was that set? The 40s?
It was the 40s, 50s.
40s and 50s, right. Yeah. And if your husband's a mob boss, calling the police is probably not the best thing to do. And probably standing up to him is not the best thing to do. Because they put you in a box, and bury you and, build a bridge, and you're in the middle of it, right? I think at one point they actually pinpointed Jimmy Hoffa's body. He's up in Detroit, buried underneath the house or something. Anyway, but that tells you what happens to you, even if you're one of them, right? They'll come after you. So, but anyway, this idea of a postmodernist that it's sort of whatever feels good, do it, and you can see the problem with that. If I think killing people's cool, I'm going to cause problems in society. If I think dealing drugs is okay, I'm going to cause problems in relation to what other people think is right and wrong. Okay? And people say, look, you cannot have a society that operates on whatever people want should be the rule. But people will also say you cannot operate a society that says, all right, this is wrong and it will never be anything but wrong, like marijuana smoking. How many people have gone to jail over that? And scientific studies have proven several things. One, that it is not directly related to lung cancer. Two, that it is not directly related to psychosis. And three, that alcohol and nicotine are both more addictive and much more dangerous than marijuana ever will be. Somewhere around 12,000 people die every year from alcohol poisoning alone in this country. Jeff, you said you were EMT, right? Paramedic. Sorry. You probably pick up a lot of people who are suffering from alcohol issues, right? How many people do you pick up suffering from a marijuana overdose?
A year, probably one or two.
People freaking out.
Yeah.
Right? They're not dying though, are they?
Well, no, it's not even that.
But they're just losing it.
Yeah.
Right? They can't breathe. They're hyperventilating.
I don't like tell them that they can't go to the hospital, but you gotta calm them down for a second.
Right. And also let's take if the idea of why certain things are illegal is because they harm your health, then why the hell are cigarettes legal? They kill 440,000 people every year. Why are Oreos legal? Why is fast food legal? Why are cars legal? How about airplanes? How about golf clubs? Those things are dangerous. Go stand out in the lightning storm. Go ask Tiger Woods how dangerous. Does anybody believe that his wife didn't hit him?
She beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, really. He just didn't want to admit it. That some Swedish beauty queen knocked the hell out of me. Cold cocky. I want to see her hand. That would have been the story, right?
You got some bloody knuckles.
Yeah, come on. Anyway. But again, it's this element here that, and postmodernists also say because of this, the societies are spinning out of control. that you have people just willy-nilly embezzling money, stealing, Bernie Madoff, whatever, I'm doing my thing, you know. Or even worse, people operating inside the law, selling bad mortgages because they are allowed to because the market's been deregulated, and taking the commission, getting $4 or $5 million in commission, and then retiring and not worrying about what happens when those mortgages go bad. That's exactly what happened. Watch House of Cards. The CNBC documentary. Watch House of Cards. Not only did the lenders engage in deviant behavior, the borrowers exaggerated what? Does anybody know? They lied about this on their income. Like, sometimes stating 5 or 6 times what they made. And their idea was, well, I'll buy the house and I'll flip it and sell it in 2 years. It was so bad that they were allowing people to borrow the money for the down payment. Do you see how stupid that is? And here's the thing. If you didn't put any money whatsoever into a house, and all of a sudden the payments go up, and you can't afford it, I'll throw the keys in the kitchen, I'll see you later. I don't give a damn about my credit report. Everybody else's credit's ruined too. I just suckered the bank into letting me live in a house for 2 or 3 years without paying a dime. Thanks a lot, bank. But the bank is like, hey, thanks a lot to you, now we got a government bailout. We don't have to do any real work anymore. And again, people didn't see that this was wrong until the whole, and this is what I love. This is certainly one element of capitalism. The capitalist system said, whoa, we don't think that's right, and here's what's going to happen. Here's the stock market at 14,000, 6,600. Here's unemployment at 6%, 10.5. You can't... You can't bullshit the market. Although you can come in and tamper with it by bailing everybody out. Bank of America should have went broke. AIG should have went broke. Fannie and Freddie should have went broke. They should have all went bankrupt. GM, Chrysler, all of them. Because they're bad businesses.
That also tells you a lot about the government.
Yeah,
what
that
they say about free market. Free market. If you lose, you go out of business. Sucks
That's
for
what's
you.
called moral hazard. That here's the thing: if I make good investments and they make money, I get all the riches.
Then why would you
And then
invest in
but here's the thing: if I lose money, the government picks up the tab. So the government is giving me an incentive to risk at the highest level. Because if I lose, the government's going to come in. It's like going to a casino and the casino going, hey, whatever you lose, we'll give back to you. Whatever you win, you can keep. A casino got out of business like that.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. Don't think you're going to go to Vegas and beat a casino. Because even if you get the money, they're going to follow you out the door. Like Rain Man. They'd be like, I think it'd be best if you take your winnings and leave the state. That kind of stuff. Although in Windsor, that's a Canadian casino. Maybe you could try to get it over. I see people who think they can beat the slot machines and stuff like that. But anyway, but again, that's the question. And also, one of the issues was the Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, he believed in the market system. He thought, hey, this is what happens. These companies are going to go out of business, but the rest of these financial people, especially AIG, when AIG started collapsing, everything was interrelated. AIG was selling insurance on mortgages that Bank of America...
It's a domino effect.
Right. So what happens was, Bank of America not only lost money, but now AIG, because they insured the loans that they thought weren't going to go bad, had to pay a bunch more money, and therefore, again, they didn't have the capital reserves because they had lent all this money out, and what the government was in a situation of, well, you know what? We could do what's right and let these places fail, and the whole economy is going to go through the crap hole, and we're going to have 30% unemployment, and the GDP is going to drop by, and that's essentially what Herbert Hoover did. He said, all right, I'm a Republican, hands off. Hey, you guys should have done stupid stuff. And he said, look, the market will work itself out. And people were like, no, you need to do something. And that's why Roosevelt got into office. He said, hey, I'll do something. I'll get unemployment insurance, I'll get government work projects. And again, Hoover is not remembered in a good way. The Depression actually started, or the stock market crash happened 8 months after he took, less than that, because presidents used to be inaugurated in March. They changed that after 1932 because Roosevelt wanted to get into office quicker. They wanted the presidents in quicker. They didn't want this 3 month, 3-4 month lag period. So Hoover was in office, what's March, 3rd month? And the stock market collapsed in, what, October? So you're talking, in 7 months, he went from the economy doing great, and the stock market up at, it was like, I think 347 points, it dropped 95% by 1931. And so he was completely like blindsided by this. Okay, and again, he felt, hey, it's like this. If you own a Chinese restaurant and you sell crappy food, you need to go out of business. You know? If you're, and people even extend that and say, if you're Walmart and you abuse employees, you should have to go out of business. But that's not the way the system works. Because capitalism has been adulterated. It's not what it used to be. It's a mixed system. We have stops in place, like banks. Your bank account is insured up to $100,000. No matter what happens to the bank, unless you withdraw it. Jeff?
I think that the issue is that we can't afford to start from zero again. That was the whole purpose of the bailouts. I mean, if you let all these companies just go bankrupt, I mean...
It's like you'd rather fall off the mountain halfway than all the way down.
Exactly.
Even if it was a lesson that needed to be learned.
Yeah, but at the same time, you really can't. I mean, the economy still won't be able to survive because in our complex economy, we need those businesses, those multi-trillion-dollar businesses, to keep our GDP up. I mean, would you rather have one big business or 1,000 little businesses? I'd rather have one big business that that peddles one particular product. An example, ExxonMobil. Would you rather have ExxonMobil in place? Keeping the economy up, or
Some people would say that you are just going to exacerbate the issue that was the problem at the core, that these companies were too big to fail. And that if we had a bunch of state banks, first of all, they wouldn't have gotten involved in this nonsense of selling mortgage-backed securities to China and Norway and all these, and Iceland. Iceland's country almost went bankrupt because look. If you watch that House of Cards, this one woman, this Norwegian mayor of the town of Narvik says, I learned, she said, Faber goes, what lesson did you learn? He said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I was like, man, I learned that in kindergarten, first of all. So, there's a book that actually says the 5 things I learned in kindergarten or something like that. Anyway, people need to read that book. And she also said, I know now not to trust rich men in Armani suits. I was like, I knew that one too. That's why they put criminals in really expensive suits when they go into court, because they think they're going to fool. I'm telling you right now, you put somebody in this suit, people are suckers for that stuff, a lot of people. They're like, wow, look at you, you're all dolled up, you're looking great. It's like, look, it's a murderer.
It looks good.
Yeah. And that's all these brokers were. They were sort of financial murderers, or rapists, whatever way you want to put it. They came in with their perfume and their Rolex watches and their limos. And, don't worry, we've sold this to people before. Don't make out like a bandit. You'll be a hero. And shame on these people for buying this garbage. You should know better than Wall Street ain't going to tell you the truth. So that's part of the issue. But again, what it says is there's a high level of confusion about what's right and wrong, what should be done. Should we do it to save the system, or should we do it on principle? Right? So that's a big part of it. For a lot of people, principle is way more important than practicality of things. For other people, it's the opposite. So, related to this is this pluralist social contract theorist, actually another a version of what is right and wrong according to society. These theorists use the concept that we all enter into society as individuals and we give up part of our rights. This is what's known as a social contract. As individuals, to be part of the social contract, in order to take advantage of the power of large societies to provide for physical and emotional needs of the family and individuals, the pluralists suggest that we all can help to decide what is right and wrong in society by democratic action, either by voting and lobbying or social movements and protests. Think about the abortion issue. Right? That was decided by the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade, but there was an enormous lead-up of pro-choice activists lobbying the government, challenging with... Who do you think brought that case to the Supreme Court? It was these organizations. And they made a concerted effort to make everybody, or at least as many people as possible, believe that abortion should be legal, and here's the reason why. And they would say things like, hey, maybe you don't support abortion, but would you rather have a legal abortion where someone can make the decision and let them deal with the consequences of that decision? Or would you rather have somebody with a rusty knife on a card table in a back alley cutting someone's open because they can't, like in Ireland? People were going out on the boats into international water to get abortions. And the Irish government finally was like, all right, we'll relent. Now, why would the Irish government be against the Republic of Ireland, not Northern Ireland? Catholic. Right. Any Catholic, most Catholic countries do. Like, does anybody know, does Italy have abortion?
Mexico does not. Brazil.
Because you know what surprised me about Italy is that actually, if you look at the statistics, there's like 35% of Italians are atheists. I'm not kidding you. And it's Catholicism is part of their culture, not just their religion. So a lot of them will cross themselves but never dare set foot in the church, or they'll wear a crucifix and not pray, and you know, things like that. And it's about identity more than I believe that this Jesus character did all these things that you say he did, which probably upsets a lot of their parents. Now, many times when people get older, things change and you get married and have kids. You know, all of a sudden, you start worrying about the afterlife. Right? All of a sudden, you start worrying about stability and crime and what the schools are like. Who cares when you're single, right? Especially if you're single and you like to mess around. What good is being shackled by a religion, saying you can't sleep with people? Okay? And in Protestantism, you can't go to confession. Maybe Lutherans. There is no confession in Baptists.
So once you screw up once as a Protestant, you're done?
No, because you can ask forgiveness. No, here's the difference. In the Catholic Church, you have to ask a priest for forgiveness because he is the intermediary between you and God. Luther put it into that and said you can have your own relationship with God and ask for forgiveness. Jesus actually said the same thing. Remember when the woman broke, if you guys know the story, remember the woman that broke the thing of oil on his head, washed his feet with her tears? It's not Mary Magdalene, okay, look it up. Trust me. She's not the hooker either, it always gets confused. Anyway, I'm telling you. Jesus says in the front of a bunch of Pharisees, your sins are forgiven. And they said, what did you just say? You can't do that. And he said, anybody can do that. And that's what Luther was mad about. Beforehand, you have to get permission. And like the Pope would sell forgiveness for sins. Like for the rest of your life. If you paid a certain amount, they were like, here, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to heaven because you gave us the money. And that's what Luther was mad about. When he went to Rome, he thought it was he was shocked. He thought it was like Las Vegas. He's like, what the hell's going on here? You guys are like dealing like a casino in here. And again, that's Protestants. So Protestants, they confess to God. They don't confess to them. Although Lutherans, believe it or not, some of them do. So that's one of the major differences. Anyway. But again, how much say does the average American have in the law or religious ideas of good and evil? I mean, try it. Next time you go to church, Protestant or Catholic, go, raise your hand and go, preacher, father, whoever, are you sure that Jesus was a virgin?
Yeah, right.
See? Why do you think Dan Brown wrote that book and it sold 60 million copies? I bet more people who hate Dan Brown bought that book than like it. I almost bet you that most really devout Christians have a copy of that book and they use it as like, this is the words of the devil. How dare you call him to question? Like, for example, we don't know what Jesus did from ages 12 to 33. Hey, in Indian culture, they call him Esau, and he went to India to learn from like Buddhist masters and stuff like that, Hindu stuff. Like, seriously, that's what people believe. They actually have a couple, some historical documentation to back some of this stuff up, if they think he's the same person. But again, you don't get to decide what the catechism is. You know what, Father? I think this birth control rule is kind of stupid, don't you? What's so wrong about abortion, dude? Come on, lighten up. That's not really Jesus' blood, it's wine. You go in and you start saying stuff like that, see how long that lasts. You get the seal of excommunication or something like that, which is what they gave to Luther, and they tried to drag him off and burn him at the stake. The Catholic Church didn't mess around back then. You dared to question the teachings of the Catholic Church, and they burned you out in public. And those of you who've never smelled a dead bird, and I've smelled dead animals, and it's nasty. Like if you ever catch one across the road or something. When human beings burn, I heard it is the most disgusting, despicable smell. It carries for miles. You will never forget it. It gets in your nose and it never goes away. Like it's one of those things like all of a sudden like the wind will rough and like you get the wisp of the memory of the smell in your head. I'm telling you, sit in a room with a dead rat for a little while and tell me how you feel. You know how it smells. So the church would yes.
I went to a cadaver lab before.
See, and that's formaldehyde to keep the stink down.
Do they still excommunicate people in the church?
Oh yeah.
I smelled like
I ain't no games. No, but it's you got to do some serious stuff like worshiping Satan or something like. I mean, you'd have to be a serial killer or something like that. But having an abortion is not going to be looked at in a Baptist or in a Protestant or a Catholic church. Not going to be looked at in a good way. But again, you don't get to decide Christianity. Now, you want to start your own church, that's fine. But the other churches are going to attack you. That's essentially what the Mormons, what some of the Mormons did. They say, hey, look, we don't agree. And Quakers too. They said, look. In some of these monasteries, these monastical orders, they said, you're all wrong. The church is decadent. We're going to go off in the woods somewhere and meditate and not eat stuff and take a vow of poverty. Luther was in one of these monasteries and he used to beat himself with a whip. They said the other monks had to stop him because he was going to kill himself. And monks used to wear like rough clothes and like eat very basic foods. They also, believe it or not, would dye for money. They would dye clothing and they would brew beer. So the best place to get the best beer usually was the monastery. Because water could kill you. You know, you could just dip your cup in the creek, and they didn't understand the boil things. That's how dumb people were. They didn't understand that brewing beer is through a process of boiling, and that's what cleaned the water. They didn't understand that. They just didn't understand. They didn't understand washing your hands either, which is mind-boggling.
Was that your class in social too that we learned about the religion with the guys from England that thought they were like Jedi's and they used the Force and stuff? That was your class, right?
Yeah, right. Believe it or not, there's about 4 to 5% of the British public who believes in the Force. I'm not kidding, unless they were joking.
They like dress up in robes and stuff, right? Like they really think like,
there's people that celebrate fake holidays or like Seinfeld holidays like Festivus. You know, there are people who like worship all kinds of bizarre stuff. The sun. I saw this one show on the National Geographic Channel. This guy was trying to make love to his car, like kissing it and stuff. Like weird stuff. People bow to statues. I mean, there's voodoo. There's all kinds of stuff. But you're right. That's a little odd because that's something out of a fictional movie. Here's the problem, though. You don't know if those people were just joking.
But Scientology was based on fiction too, right?
Well,
I mean, no disrespect.
I've heard a lot of stories. That L. Ron Hubbard did that as a bit of a joke, or like a bet. But if you tell Tom Cruise that, he's dedicated to the lie. So don't tell Tom Cruise that. Okay. Huh? Isaac Hayes even quit South Park because he kept making fun of Scientology. And then he died like a couple months later. He died of natural cause. Was he the one on the treadmill when he dropped dead? Because Bernie Mac died about right at the same time from like some kind of illness.
Bernie Mac.
Yeah. If Isaac Hayes died, he was next to the treadmill. Which means he was... I'll tell you right now, next to auto racing, do you guys know what the most dangerous sport is? Marathon running. They don't tell you that in gym class, Left foot, right foot, drop dead, I mean, that's a mess. You'd think it would be something like hockey or football or something like that. Anyway. Alright, so let's move on here. Number 4, another theory of what's right and wrong and why it changes is generational change. Many times what is considered to be deviant changes over time based on differing interpretations of experiences by different generations. This is certainly an explanation that's used to explain the massive social and moral as well as legal shifts that took place during the 1959 to 79. What things were, and you can talk about criminal or non-criminal deviance, what sorts of things were considered to be okay or considered to be deviant in the 1950s that changed to, after post-80s and 70s?
Cohabitation between unmarried.
Right. If you were not married, especially if you were unwed, pregnant, if you were a teen pregnant, that was a serious problem. But it did happen. But for the most part, the mainstream looked at that very negatively. What else?
A woman not married.
Right. So a woman being either single or wanting a career, those types of things. What else?
Hippies.
What do you mean? Just acting that long hair? If we want to break down their behavior, long hair, painting your face, wearing sandals,
Out of college.
right? Not getting a real job, living in a commune, being communist, all that other stuff, right? What about legal things? What has changed legally? I can think of one that you probably don't like. You know what happened to the... Most things liberalized, guess what happened to the drinking age?
Moved from 18 to 20.
The voting age went down. I think you need a drink to vote. Something. They closed the bars in Mexico on election day. It's probably alcoholics probably losing their mind. They probably stock up the night before. And I love it. I love in New York that they have this ridiculous rule that you can't buy alcohol after like 2 o'clock on Sunday. What the hell's the point of locking the stupid for 8-9 hours? I mean,
it's like that old. It's like that every night.
it's stupid. No, it's not. I've been in at 4 o'clock in the morning at 7-Eleven and gotten alcohol on a Tuesday night. You'd think they'd want to lock the thing on Tuesday night, not Sunday.
I know in Jersey they close it in nightclubs and bars. Like
That's probably blue law. That's probably in the South. It's even crazier. In some small towns, everything shut down. If you don't shut down, you get fined and all kinds of stuff. Yep. You got to stock up on food. That's like the traditional view of the Sabbath. Like if you're Orthodox Jewish, you are supposed to prepare all your food the day before, and you are not supposed to answer the phone or answer the door or anything. Talk on the phone, nothing. If you're really devout, like most people don't take it that far, right? Huh?
Hasidic Jews do that, right?
Yeah, but most people don't take it that far. You know, most people will. But again, and what's interesting is that like I have a friend who lives on Ocean Avenue, and it's predominantly there's a lot of Jewish people in that neighborhood, and some of them run pizza places. They close down on Friday night.
It's a lot of money.
Sabbath, sundown. Yeah, but that shows you dedication, doesn't it? You know, I bet the Italian pizza places call us up on Friday night. We're not closed.
That's right. That's right.
Playing it off. Anyway, although the Jewish pizza places are open on Sunday. So anyway,
They're pretty good, actually.
that is pretty good. What else? What are some other things that are acceptable? How about stuff that's still legal but it's way more acceptable now? Tattoos aren't technically illegal, not in all states. I think South Dakota they're illegal.
Underage drinking.
Oklahoma used to be until a few years ago.
Yeah, you can't even have a tattoo parlor.
To legalize tattooing.
How about and I mentioned this before. How about drug use? Is that much more acceptable now? Just in general, it is. Look, Charlie Sheen goes on Diane Sawyer and talks about banging 7 Gs and smoking crack. Nobody's even throwing him in jail. Kate Moss was doing coke on YouTube. You know?
Michael Phelps smoked a bong in the picture.
Yeah, Lady Gaga said, yeah, I use drugs. Yeah. Seth Rogen on the Dave Letterman show said, yeah, I've been stoned the entire time I wrote all my scripts. Seth Rogen, does it surprise you that someone wrote Pineapple Express and Superbad would be stoned? I'm surprised it wouldn't I'm surprised he went on heroin or something like that, or Phoenix or something like that. I mean, good job.
He's Jewish. We like marijuana more.
What are you trying to say?
That's like a Harold and Kumar, two Jewish thumbers.
Yeah.
See, now you guys
They're
are
like the
dealing
law
in,
students, right?
now you guys are dealing in generalization.
School stoners.
I would say just generally, your generation and even probably my generation has been inundated with the reality that, at least at the very minimum, marijuana is not a big deal. And if you go through an experimentation period with little coke, maybe some acid, some mushrooms, no big deal, right? I mean, you'd be surprised at how some straight-laced people will tell you, yeah, I did heroin once. It's like, what? Huh? And nowadays with pills like OxyContin, you essentially just take heroin like that. You know, that's one of the reasons why these things are so addictive. Why prescription drug abuse is becoming such a problem. This is just a return of heroin. That's all it is. And it's more chic to take a pill nowadays. Here's something that's lost favor: intravenous drug use. I don't think that's ever been acceptable. But certainly among certain groups like beatniks and during the 70s, for example, the 70s, drugs were way more acceptable. I mean, the principal of your school was getting you high. You know, I mean, seriously.
You know, but they put so much emphasis on marijuana nowadays.
Which is absurd because if you look at it, it's probably the most. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it, but look, I'm looking at the statistics, and if you look at the statistics, fast food is more dangerous.
No, it's just them being defensive because the original legislation that made marijuana illegal
Was from the oil and paper company.
Yeah, it was so weak to begin with, so now they have to go on the offensive.
And plus this element of the United States has a habit of acting impulsively towards certain substances like alcohol. We outlawed alcohol. And before the national laws, there had been a myriad of laws from the colonial times on of local communities being dry and states being dry and colonies being dry. And so this has been a constant battle. And same with marijuana. There were instances, and there are still states now, even in New York, where it's like in Alaska, there ain't nobody going to bother you about that. Las Vegas ain't nobody going to bother you about that. And I'll tell you right now, even if it is against the law, the police police are much more interested in people smoking crack or something like that.
More just in DUIs.
Yeah.
It stopped me.
Because they know what hurts people. They don't deal in... Police deal with reality. They see this stuff every day. They see what they arrest people for, and they do not arrest people for marijuana, robbing convenience stores, unless they're looking for, like, caramel popcorn or something. You remember the joke from Dazed and Confused when Mary Jane says to Dave's character, marijuana's a gateway drug, at least to other things. And he goes, yeah, usually junk food. Right? And we got people in jail for 30 years for marijuana, and a child molester gets 8. I mean, I'm serious, your government does that kind of... Dante Stallworth ran over somebody in his car while he was drunk and did 30 days.
29.
Or whatever. That's worse. And he's back in the NFL, too.
Anyway, he got away with it.
Yeah, he killed somebody in his car in an accident and left the scene.
So, like, I'll give you an example of me. Like, I went.
You guys, please.
I've been in school for this. I'm going to graduate with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and then I have 3 years in the military. And I went for an NYPD interview, and when they asked me if I ever smoked marijuana before, I told them yes.
Might as well tell them yes, because
So
the lie detector test's going to pick it up.
Well, they disqualified me for it.
What?
Yep, they told me that I couldn't conform to.
Because you're partly psychotic?
No, I can't conform to adulthood because I smoke marijuana.
Did they ask you, do you still do it, or did you do it 5 years ago?
They asked me, have I ever smoked marijuana? I said yes. They said when I started college.
So they didn't ask you how much or how many times?
No,
It wasn't to Bill Clinton, you just said I didn't inhale.
But I know guys who have gotten on with had to take anger management.
Or alcohol problems?
Alcohol
Yeah.
abuse,
That's way worse. And I'll tell you right now, and you probably know
I
this.
feel the end lost too, by the way.
Well, you probably know this. I had a police officer. He was a retired police officer. He was great for my class. I remember when I came in, because you know this, police are not allowed to wear, most police forces, you're not allowed to wear any facial hair except for a mustache. So and mustaches are out of style. Unless you're trying to look like Burt Reynolds. Look, there's 2 people who wear just mustaches. There ain't nobody in this classroom just wearing a mustache, right? You've got some little hair there. They're either somebody who's from the 70s who never changed their style, or like trying to be a porn star like Ron Jeremy or something. Or like Ron Burgundy, something like that, right? Or they're a cop. And I remember coming in the room, and he was sitting right in the front, and I remember this chill going up my back going, holy crap. Because it was a social alcoholism and drug abuse class. I was sitting there thinking, did I do anything wrong there the past month? Or I shouldn't read my text message. Anyway, but I remember one of the things he said was, I was talking about how some people at AA and NA meetings are suspicious, especially NA meetings, that if you were a cop and you knew people were chronically relapsed, why don't you just go to NA and listen to who's doing what, and then take your license plate down and follow them around, because eventually they're going to go lead you to the guy who's selling the drugs. and that'll lead to a lot of people not wanting to talk, where at AA it's much more you can talk about alcohol. Here's the thing, when you're an alcoholic and you tell people at work, they're like, oh, come here, let me hug you. If you're a drug addict, you're like, whoa, hide my purse. Get that person away from me. I don't want to see you around my kids. You're fired, that kind of stuff. What he said was, hey, a lot of cops are in AA.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And again, I would say,
you have on the job that smoke marijuana when they go home.
Well, here's the problem. You have people who have violent sociopathic behavior, and many of them join the police force so they can just have a gun in their hands and literally shoot people. You're going to let them on the force. Like these people who were mob hitmen, and the one guy who sodomized that guy with the plunger, and all that kind of stuff. You know, we need police officers who are controlled and know how to deal with things in context and live in the neighborhoods they control. There's another issue, too. Okay. Go ask the people up in the Bronx about community policing. How many, do you live in the Bronx? How many Hispanic and black cops are in there now? What's the population like? And how is the attitude of the police and of the people towards the police? You guys, please.
They test
you.
You.
Add something.
They test you. You go through the whole process. And see what I didn't like. They'll test you at the end before you get to the academy. So they want you to be, and then when you walk,
when you already have a gun in your hand.
When you walk in, the psychologist tells you right away. He's like, "Listen, I want you to be honest with me because there's nothing that you're going to not tell me."
It reminds me of the Observe and Report with Seth Rogen.
How long did you take the test?
I took it in 2007 when I was 18. I waited till I was 21 to open the case. I opened it up. They pushed me all the way through. They were going to put me in the last academy that just went through, and I ended up getting disqualified, paying $680 for a girl I know who actually goes, here's father to reevaluate me. So now they got me thinking.
Here's the thing, though. You said you appealed it, though. Did you?
I appealed it and I lost.
Here's the problem, though. You are appealing it to a state or a county agency that's going to side with the police. You need to appeal it to a federal court. That's the only thing that's going to do it.
What was I gonna? What defense did I have? You know,
that you admitted to a behavior that is only a violation of the law, not even a misdemeanor, and that it occurred only once, and that it is no longer a concurrent use, and therefore they're discriminating against you based on past behavior. This would be like saying if you've been arrested for drunk and disorderly, then you shouldn't be a cop.
I'm gonna retake the test.
I'm telling you, camera, file charges in federal court. You'll at least get your money back.
Because see, what they told me is that the next step would have to go to the Supreme Court, and I figured the Supreme Court's not going to listen to me.
You mean the state Supreme Court?
No, the federal Supreme Court.
No, you can go to a federal circuit court. Right in Manhattan, there's a federal circuit court. They're the ones who put Martha Stewart in jail.
It's probably too late to do it.
It's never too late, according to a lawyer. Anyway, all right, but that's a good point. All right, let's move on here a little bit. Everybody, please. Let's move on to some theories about why people commit criminal deviance, particularly murder. We will focus on sociological theories, but biological, psychological, and religious theories are put forth too. So for the longest time, people thought deviance came out of personality disorder. So because people had something biologically wrong with them, there was this science called phrenology, where people would actually put their hands on the bumps of your head. And if you had the cranial skull of a criminal, they would label you as such. On top of that, a lot of religious theories surrounding deviance surround what? What do they coalesce around? What would a religious person say why somebody did something wrong? Huh?
Jesus told me to do it.
No.
The devil made him do it.
Yeah, that they're possessed by a demon, or they're not going to church enough and giving enough money. You didn't tithe enough. What? It's already on Blackboard. Okay. All right. Now, one of the major theories, and I ask you to read the notes on this about animated strain. And here's the thing. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to read a little bit of a part out of this Hitler book to make you understand that maybe this is what was going on. First of all, does anybody know what did Hitler want to be?
An artist.
Did he have the talent probably to do that?
No, they kicked him out.
Although his landscape looked good. He actually took an examination like you did, and then the administrator said, forget it, and he happened to be Jewish, the teacher did, and supposedly he was pretty cruel in his estimation. And then, when Hitler applied the next year, they didn't even give him the examination. They were like, what, do you think you got better? And they told him, hey, focus on people. He would never put people in his, it was just landscapes, it was always people. But he failed, and some people feel that, look, he had unrealistic expectations about his life. He thought he was better than everybody else, and you see that repeatedly, and it's why that the superiority stuff comes out. Which is funny, because he also had an inferiority complex. Because he thought he was biologically Jewish, and it bothered him, and he was scared that somebody would find out. There's some indication he may have caught syphilis from a hooker. Seriously, it was probably a gypsy or a Jewish hooker, somebody that lived in Vienna at the time that, again, he blamed, and again, he was already anti-Semitic on some levels, although he, in his past life, had defended Jews. But at some point, he felt that they were the great scapegoat, and he read anti-Semitic literature and stuff in Vienna, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Vienna anyway. But this idea here that Hitler wanted a lot for his life, thought a lot of himself, and yet every time he went out there, he failed. He failed to get an art school, he was too lazy to keep a job, he went from flop house to flop house, he was essentially homeless. At one point, one of the people mentions in the book that the first time they met him, he was wearing nothing but torn pants because they were delousing his shirt and hat, meaning they were getting lice off of it. This was not somebody who came out of, and Stalin's life was very similar too. Hitler's father was an alcoholic, he beat the hell out of him. His mother was somewhat overbearing to some extent, and about 20 years younger than his dad, and they were also second cousins. And Hitler actually had an affair later on with Geli Rabeau, who shot herself, and that was his half-niece. Here's the thing, though. In small towns in Austria, it was not uncommon, and the royal family did this too, to marry cousins. It wasn't. Because they were small town. What do you want to do? I mean, they were against... You want to marry a man because they're not related? I mean, as much as incest was bad, being homosexual or not being married was even worse. So if you had to marry your second cousin, Hitler's dad had to get special dispensation from the state in order to marry Hitler's mom. And Hitler's dad's real name is Schicklgruber. Okay, believe it or not. Anyway, but again, this element of expectations. Now, this is particular to America. And this focus on the American dream led people to set their goals too high, and when they couldn't achieve them, or cannot achieve them, legitimately, it causes a feeling of animating strain, frustration, anger. In Hitler's part, he started to blame everybody. Hitler was a bit of a narcissist, and that's probably an understatement. And narcissists, when they fail, they never blame themselves. Who do they blame? Huh? Jeff? Everyone else, society, it's the Jews, it's the elites, it's the government, it's this dumb Austrian empire that doesn't know, it's democracy, it's socialism, it's whatever else except for me. I'm not lazy, I'm not a bum, you people don't have to recognize talent. It reminds me of some of these people on American Idol who get rejected and start crying their eyes out. They obviously are delusional. And being a narcissist is delusional, isn't it? Why is being a narcissist? First of all, what is being a narcissist? What is a narcissist? And why does it depend on a lot of delusion? Fantasy.
About themselves, right?
Narcissists believe themselves to be better than everybody else. They're above the rules. They think they're innately charming. They think they're wonderfully intelligent. They think they should succeed at everything. And they're absolutely wrong almost on every count. Okay? And probably the most dangerous narcissists are insecure narcissists. Introverted narcissists. Insecure meaning that they're filled with shame. And they feel that not only am I better than everybody else, but I have this sense of inferiority because, like Hitler. Hitler thought he was inherently better than everybody else, but his social position didn't say that. So it created this tension of, well, damn it, I should be better off. And it creates this frustration and resentment, and probably nothing quicker than it drives people to certain types of crime other than resentment. So again, here's the example though. The person who wanted to be a rich executive cannot get into business school, so he runs a chop shop or deals drugs. Hey, I'm still using my business knowledge. It's like American Gangster. Anybody seen this movie with Frank Lucas? Mm-hmm. Do you think he would have probably rather have done something besides sell heroin? But he felt he had no other choice. Or that this was the best opportunity. Maybe there's no other choice. But the choice was work at a car wash or sell drugs and become a millionaire. Same with Freeway Rick Ross, too. I don't think he wanted to be the biggest cocaine dealer in the world. And I saw an interview with him. I saw an interview with Rick Ross, not the real one. Not the in prison. Not the prison guard guy. Yeah, not the prison guard guy. He calls himself the real Rick Ross. This guy said Rick Ross, the real Freeway Rick Ross, the one in prison, said he showed more people how to rock up crack than anybody else. And that he almost single-handedly started the crack with the baking soda, because before to make crack you had that ether. That's why Richard Pryor caught him.
That's like the guy from Blow too, the movie Blow, wasn't it? George Jones.
Right. Yeah. They started selling weed. Right. They started selling weed, and then they got caught, and then they went to prison, and they met that one guy. I can't remember his name. The one, he was South American, and he hooked him up to the cocaine. He was like, remember you met Pablo Escobar and all this other stuff, and it was alluring and romantic. And many times crime is romantic for people, right? Anyway, the next theory, so also on some levels, one last thing, the strain leads to potential crimes as well as violent revenge against society. That's one of the reasons that they use for mass murders. And there's no doubt in the minds of many historians that Hitler was obsessed with revenge. That it was his main thing. That it was not just about elevating Germany, it was much more about harming those that he thought were against him. And getting rid of the mongrels, like the Slavs and the Russians and the communists. Bolsheviks is what he calls them, or Marxists. And he conflated, to him, Marxist and being Jewish and Marxist were the same thing. He did not see the difference between those two things. What's bizarre is, there were actually a fair amount of Jewish soldiers in the SS, believe it or not. And Hitler actually used them as sort of, see, these are good German Jewish people who are fighting for the right. Right? The second theory, one of the main theories, is broken bonds theory. You can see this actually in Hitler's life too. Poor socialization and lack of positive role models and broken relationships inside the family. This is an element. Let me go back here. So somebody tell me why lack of parenting or lack of affection in your life, what are some of the ways that would drive people into a life of crime? Right, so nobody teach you right and wrong. It would be a part of it, right? Or if you do commit wrong, does someone to guilt you into being it? What else?
No structure.
Right, so you don't learn what it's like to be in a stable household, so this chaos has become part of your life, so you just commit crimes. What's another element from a practical, material standpoint? What happens when you don't have parents, when you're an orphan? There are a lot of rich orphans, besides Richie Rich or something. Wasn't he an orphan? Batman was. He murders people without trial. What happens? What's your material state like normally when you're an orphan?
What happened?
Yeah, it's pretty poor, and you see everybody else around you with things. If you notice, a lot of the villains that people put in villains and heroes are orphans. Luke Skywalker was an orphan, sort of. Darth Vader was sort of an orphan. You know, like we have these elements of people being orphans and like losing their mind and like killing a bunch of people and stuff like, which is totally outrageous. And I'm sure people who are orphans or get adopted can't stand this stuff. This was actually something. If you saw remember the Seinfeld episode with Joel Rifkin in it? If you don't see it, try to catch it. Kramer's theory was Joel Rifkin was an orphan. That's why he did this. And Elaine was dating some guy whose name was Joel Rifkin. And the guy, he showed the picture of his parents to Elaine. And she goes, wow, you look just like him. And he goes, no, I don't. He's like, yeah, you do. She's like, no, I don't. He's like, Elaine, I'm adopted. And Elaine's mind goes to what Kramer said about murdering people. But again, if you're an orphan, that ain't funny, right? And it goes beyond being an orphan. It's also about being abused as a child. Those types of things occur, right? Bad bonds is about being abused, or about neglect, things like that. Now, related to that is the cycle of violence theory. We'll come to number 3 here in a minute. It's that those who have been abused and mistreated as children will do the same to others when they grow up. Another one has to do with the subcultural aspects of deviance. I think might save the reading for Hitler until Monday, until you read it. But you'll see in that first chapter how they're constructing his life, and we'll break it down, his early life. And it's not just his early life that what happened. I think things like the Depression really hit Hitler and gave him ammunition to seize the corrupt, decadent democracy with its Western values who drove our country into the ground. And then he used the stock market crash again to blame Jews. Saying this international finance nonsense going on. But one of the other theories is, and this might apply to how Nazis were able to sort of justify their behavior or keep from feeling bad about what they were doing, this idea of a subcultural theory that suggests that if you surround yourself with criminal elements, you'll learn and perform crime to fit in and gain status among the group. Explains white-collar crime and gangs, that it becomes, when you join one of these groups, like a Nazi group, where it becomes a contest to see who can be the greatest among equals. Who can be the best Nazi? And that means who can bring the most Jews to the concentration camp? Who can do the most for Hitler? Who can do the most for Germany? That kind of stuff. Or if it's like Enron, who can bring in the most money for Enron? It doesn't matter how you do it. Or like stuff like, did you guys ever hear the story of how A-Rod got into steroids? He was at a party, and I think somebody was there, and he started asking around about what it was like. It was somebody like a Palmero or one of them. It was one of the guys that had already done it. And they were sort of going, all right, this is how you do it. This is what it feels like. You know, like they were instructing him on how to do it. Like you would go, like you would tell somebody how to smoke a joint. You know, hold it like this.
And that trainer was there too.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Right. Greg Anderson. That was Bonds' trainer.
Yeah, but he was the biggest, like...
No, I think you're talking about the Clemens trainer.
Okay.
Yeah,
The guy who injected his wife in the ass
Yeah.
while he wasn't home. Yeah. Look at Roger, you got more problems with steroids, buddy. If some stranger or one of your friends you know is at your house injecting your wife in the ass with steroids when you're not there, I mean, I think that's a little weird what's going on in your household. Okay. On top of that, what's worse, Roger Clemens has a son who's in baseball. Do you think he's not going to do steroids?
They use in the Arizona system when Roger Clemens was in there.
Right. That's fun. That's hilarious. But again, it's a great example, and one of the reasons why Bonds, if you read Game of Shadows, one of the reasons why Bonds took steroids is that, first of all, he hated Mark McGuire.
No, he thought everyone was racist against him.
Well, it didn't help that McGuire was white, and that he felt that McGuire was not even half of the baseball player he was, And Sosa too he was mad at, but he was mad at the fact that McGuire and Sosa were getting a lot of attention from regular and casual baseball fans who were mostly white, and that Bonds doesn't understand it. Maybe some people didn't like you because you're black, but mostly because you were a jerk, dude. You were the biggest jerk there was, dude. You didn't sign autographs. Bonds is a person like would be like he'd sign something and go get out of here. You know, you owe me $20 for that.
His theory was that it was a setup that Sammy Sosa was only hitting that many home runs to make it so it wasn't a race issue that Mark McGuire was doing it.
Or that it was only one dude doing steroids, right?
Yeah.
That if it was just McGuire, this guy's on steroids.
Yeah.
But we've come to find out they were. What's funny is that they were interviewing Mark McGuire during the home run chase in 1998, and he had androstenedione in his locker, which was legal at the time, which is a form of over-the-counter steroid. You can still get DHEA, which is a compound related to it. And they asked him what it was. He said, oh, it just helps my soreness in my muscles. I've talked to people who've taken andro. You take andro and do 20 push-ups, I'm telling you, it won't last. It's like what Carrot Top said. You guys know who Carrot Top is?
Yeah.
He's all ripped. He goes, even if I'm on steroids, you still have to lift the weights. You can't just take steroids and walk around. You'll just get big. You'll get like overweight. And your heart will get all crazy. Steroids also makes your heart go crazy. And here's a funny thing. Bonds' girlfriend said that even after he was experiencing sexual dysfunction, severe sexual dysfunction, he still wouldn't stop. He had to go buy new hats because his head was getting bigger. And I'll tell you right now, they documented how his head got bigger and stuff. If you read Game of Shadows, I encourage you to read this book because nobody has come out and said that this was false. And it was done by 2 reporters from the San Francisco Chronicle. One of them still works for ESPN. They, especially like Marion Jones and stuff, that spelled out this stuff. And poor Marion, she's the only one, she got railroaded. They were like, man, let's go after this Olympic athlete because we can get her.
Took away her gold medals.
Right, but she didn't get back the money for the Wheaties box. But you don't get money for Olympic. People have this misconception. You just get the medal. They don't give you no money at the Olympics. It's amateur athlete. I'm serious. So if you bust your ass in the ski slope, you don't get nothing.
You
Okay.
break a world record. They pay you to break a world record.
Yeah, that's like the Nobel Prize. Anyway, it was about Bonds. Oh, in the Game of Shadows, what they said was Bonds was on steroids. He on a couple times. Clear to cream, which were horse steroids like Winstrol or some disgusting crap that puts acne. Like Mark McGuire's got acne scars all over his
How do you
face.
put something that goes in a horse in your body?
Because you're stupid. I mean, it's this. You don't think it's that big of a deal. Some doctor gives it to you. Here's the other thing. He was taking at the same time. He was taking HGH, EPO, and this stuff to keep female hormones down in his body. Because if you take a bunch of steroids, your body ups the estrogen load. So you get, if you're a man, you get boobs.
Is that why you like this punk?
I'm not kidding you. They call it, excuse my language, but I won't say it, but they call it blank tits. No, with a B. With a B. Okay? You know, like some T-shirts that the Republicans made about Hillary that banned the B. Okay? Anyway, I'm not kidding. Hillary got treated like dirt. Anyway. But you see there how that can happen. It becomes normalized. Number 5, anime and a sociopathic personality. And here's a quote from, it's not the book actually, that's the article. The serial killer is a sociopath which reflects a disorder of character or personality rather than of the mind. Meaning that they're not crazy, there's something wrong with their personality which speaks to their upbringing.
Isn't that crazy?
But the thing is that we use the words insane and crazy to mean sociopathic people for the most part. No one says, no one wants to get into, no one's going to get into a debate about the details of psychosis. I mean, if you have a scientist like me, I'll separate it out and explain it to people. But most people use that word crazy and insane to mean psychopaths and sociopaths. You know, that somebody who just goes on a wild shooting spree because they've lost their mind and they're unaware of what they're doing is the same as somebody gets up and like these, remember the snipers in D.C. That were shooting people, and they were completely conscious and meditating, premeditating that from the beginning.
Most of the time they're extremely smart too, right? So
It depends. It depends on if you remember they made the distinction in the article that there were serial killers that were like really kind of compulsive serial killers that clean things up afterwards, and other ones that were kind of sloppy. So it all depends on, but that's all part of their personality. Like the BTK killer was really sexually repressed, and there's indications that he might have been homosexual, but he was growing up in the 50s in Kansas, and it wasn't exactly appropriate. And I'll tell you right now, you say, well, who cares what his parents think? Who said it was his parents? Maybe it was him. It's like Hitler with his Jewish background. He hated that part of himself. Right? Huh?
Isn't it Ed Gein that used to dress up in clown costumes while he killed people?
That sounds about right. Or like John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
Oh, weirdos. You know, weirdos. You know. That plan, and there are other serial killers who don't plan it out. It's an impulse moment.
Yeah, yeah.
You know. I remember hearing a story about this guy. He would go to the bars. He was kind of an ugly, short guy. He would go to the bar and like try and pick up the most attractive woman. And if she said no to him, he'd follow him outside. He'd follow her outside the bar and follow her home and kill her. The BTK killer used to break because he worked for ADT Security. Which if I was Brinks, I'd be like, hey, we never hired a serial killer. But here's the thing. He knew people's security codes. He knew the insides of their houses. Here's what he did. Put this on your boogeyman list. Tell this one to your kids to make them not talk to strangers. He used to break in their house and put gloves on and a mask and hide in their closet. And jump out like that on them. Like, rah, you know? And then tell them what he was going to do to them. And tie them up. The BTK meant bind them, torture, and kill them. He came up with his own name. The scary thing was, the scary thing was, I doubt you'll forget that story. The scary thing was, they didn't catch him until he made the stupid mistake of sending in, he was very proud of his murders. And the newspaper, the local newspaper said, we'll never catch him, he's not around or he's dead. He writes to the newspaper, I'm not dead.
Oh, wow.
The police write back and go, hey, can you give us some proof that you're the BTK killer? He sends in a license of one of the people he killed. And then he writes, they're talking to him through the classified ads, like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, you know, like, sort of anonymous. And he writes in the classified, or writes to the police, if I send you a disc, you can't trace it, can you? And the police couldn't believe how stupid he was. And they said, oh, no, we can't trace it. Listen to this, though. He made the disc and sent it from his church. They showed up at the church to talk to the minister. They were like, yeah, we're here to arrest Dennis Rader. We think he is the suspect in this BTK. The guy was like, what? Dennis? Dennis is the president of our church. He runs a Boy Scout troop. He teaches Sunday school. There's no way that. And when the police pulled up to his house, it had a swing out on the porch and a little picket fence. And I assure you the most shocked person must have been the woman who had been sleeping next to him for 30 years to wake up next to somebody who had killed 11 people. I doubt that woman's ever going to trust anybody for the rest of her life. They also took his kid's DNA to test. And I'm telling you right now, they thought they weren't going to get him. And had he not made that mistake, they wouldn't have.
Well, most of the sociopathic serial killers want to be caught, right?
Some of them.
They want to be recognized for their work, right?
Some of, I don't know if they want to get caught, but they certainly do want that.
Because they're proud of what they've done.
Well, one of the reasons, as you'll see on the chart here, because we're running low on time, so I want to get to this chart. We'll come back to the theories. What serial killers love is this. That's what they want. That's what they want to instill in people. That's his terror. That's what Charles Manson loved. The idea that everybody in Los Angeles. Steve McQueen left town. Those of you who don't know who Steve McQueen is, he was like sort of like Bruce Willis in Die Hard. He was the tough guy in Hollywood, and he ran like a chicken when he heard his name was on the list of people that they were going to kill. Manson had a list of celebrities that he was going to slaughter like animals. And does anybody know why he did this? He did it to start a war. Between who? Anybody know? That's terrible. Between blacks and whites. He went and killed Sharon. He went and told his family members to kill Sharon Tate, who was Roman Polanski's wife, and whoever was outside in the restaurant resident. He said, do it as viciously and nasty as possible. He said, make them know you're there. And he also. He twisted, you know, in America they say, you know what, if you're going to do a job, do it well. Manson said that to them before they left. He said, you know what, make sure you do it right. You know? He said, you know, make them scream. I mean, make them know that you were there. And they wrote the pig and stuff on the side of the wall and stuff like that. And he was going to take the wallet of one of the murder victims and put it and plant it on a black person down in Watts. And he figured that would be enough that if a rich white couple in Beverly Hills was killed by some Black Panthers, and actually he shot a Black Panther early in his life. He was a serious racist. Hitler was one of his heroes and stuff like that. And you want to talk about, we talk about Hitler. Charles Manson, by the time he was 28, had spent, or 32, he had spent 17 years in either jail or correctional institutions or juvenile halls. He is the classic example of the bad bonds and what happens to you when you're institutionalized and labeled. Also, he lived in West Virginia with his uncle who was a nut, like a Klan member or something like that. So, but you see here, some of the reasons, if you look at the sociopathic stuff, motivations for multiple murder, these aren't the only ones, but these are the main ones. Power, inspired by sadistic fantasies, a man tortured and kills a series of strangers, that's a BTK killer. Now they separated into mass and serial murder. Now, they're related, but they're different. Serial murder is usually someone who kills people they don't know, and they usually use a knife or their hands and they strangle them. Sometimes they'll use a gun. Mass murderers, on the other hand, they will kill strangers sometimes, but for example, if you kill someone you know, you're in trouble. They're going to get you. So a serial killer is not going to last very long if they kill their friends and family. Mass murderers, on the other hand, will either kill people they know or kill one person they know and a bunch of other people who are around. Like that idiot at Virginia Tech. He went and killed that woman that he thought he had a relationship with, and they always usually do it in one spree. Like that guy at Virginia Tech killed all those people at once, right? Charles Whitman went up on the University of Texas Tower and shoot. Now here's the thing. Now they might have turned into serial murderers if they were allowed. The problem is mass murderers usually get caught. Many times, like you were saying, mass murderers are the ones who stand around the scene with the gun in their hand going, yeah, I did it. And sometimes they want the cops to kill it too. Just end it. This is like a
martyrdom.
Like a suicide, like a murder-suicide, almost like unlike these idiots on 9/11, like except for without political reason. But they may think they have some kind of sick political reason. And then revenge. This is Hitler to some extent, grossly mistreated as a child. A man avenges his past by slaying a woman or whatever. After being fired from a job, a gunman. This happens a lot in America.
Looks like the sniper guys were mass murderers, right? Would you consider them mass murderers? The two snipers?
They were actually closer to serial killers because they killed strangers and they did them, one at a time, essentially. But part of the reason why they did that is because when you shoot a sniper rifle in D.C., everybody and their mama is going to know where it came from.
Right.
And I'll tell you right now, with what I know about D.C., you should be pulling guns on people in D.C. anyway. Like New Orleans. Don't go around starting fights with people in New Orleans because guns are going to come out. I'm telling you that right now. New Orleans got one of the worst murder rates in the world. So does Miami. Places. We think all these places that are nice and hot, like Dallas, you get killed in Dallas so quick. Anyway, loyalty. A team of killers turn murder into a ritual. Profit. A woman poisons to death a series of husbands. That's happened. And terror, which is usually a general thing. Serial killers often love scaring the hell out of people. They love the fact that they know who the killer is. Everybody else is scared. And what was funny about the BTK killer was people were coming to him and going, oh my God, and his wife was saying stuff like this, man, this BTK killer's sick. we gotta catch this guy. And I'm sure he was sitting there like with a Cheshire cat grin on his face going, yeah, we gotta take care of this guy. It's like Elliot Spitzer. Yeah, we got to put those people who frequent prostitution rings in jail. Well, he was like, yeah, he's going to meet up with a $5,000 hooker. So, anyway. All right, everybody, that's it. Anybody have any questions? All right.